Greetings, my beautiful lovelies. It's Emmy. Welcome back. Today I'm going to be making a cake with this. This is called Eno, and it is an antacid. Antacid. It's an over-the-counter antacid that you can purchase, and you mix it with a bit of water and you take it to relieve heartburn and indigestion. Now, this recipe was recommended to me by Violet. Violet, thank you so much for bringing this to my attention. I've never heard of this before. I actually had to order this online because I couldn't find it anywhere around here. This is called Eno, Fast Relief from Acidity, and this is regular, and they call this a fruit salt. If you remove this label here, it says salt. So Violet very kindly sent me a link to a recipe video that shows you how to prepare this cake. I'll put that link down below. It's a YouTube channel called Cooking Shooking, and I was absolutely blown away that you could make a cake not only with antacid, but one that was so simple, because we're going to take antacid and we're going to take cookies to make this recipe, and we're going to use milk. Essentially 3 ingredients to make a cake. That was enough for me. So I'm going to make 2 different versions today. I'm going to do a baked and a steamed version. The original recipe says that you can do either. The steamed version, I'm going to use the original bourbon cookies, and for the baked version, I'm going to use Oreos. I'm very curious to see what the texture will be like between the two, and of course the flavor if we use a different type of cookie. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started on this super easy recipe. So first off, here's the Eno. And it comes in a glass jar, and in the recipe they use packets, which contains 1 teaspoon or 5 grams. Let me open it. And I'm curious to see if there's any scent or flavor to this. There were other versions. There were orange and other kinds of flavors, but I got the regular because that's what was shown in the video. It has a faint kind of citrus smell. And it's got a little taste of baking soda to it, a little bit bitter. Not really any lemony, citrusy flavors at all. A little bit tart, but a little bit like baking soda toothpaste. Which leads me to ask, why would we use Eno in a cake, and why does this work? Well, it works because it's essentially like baking powder. It consists of an acid and a base. In this case, the base is sodium bicarbonate, the same base that's in baking powder, and citric acid, which is what makes that puckery sensation when we have something like a Sour Patch Kid. So when we combine an acid and base together, it's a chemical reaction, carbon dioxide bubbles are made, and that's what creates the leavening when we make a quick biscuit, for example, or a quick bread like banana bread. That is what baking powder is also composed of. Sodium bicarbonate, which is the base, but instead of citric acid, it uses tartaric acid, otherwise known as cream of tartar. Again, we have an acid and a base. Usually there's some sort of cornstarch in there to kind of keep the acid and the base from reacting. And then once water is involved, the two come together, create CO2 bubbles, making our batter rise and creating bubbles in a fluffy, beautiful cake or bread. So basically, Eno is going to be our substitution for baking powder. Now, is this safe to use? I imagine so, because this is made for consumption as an antacid. Will it taste different? I don't know. That's why I'm doing this. And can we make a cake using this ground up cookies and milk? I don't know. Let's find out. All right, let's do this. So the first thing we're going to do is grind up some bourbon cookies. Now, I ordered these cookies online as well. Bourbon cookies are these little chocolate cookie biscuits, and this is what they look like, a little bourbon cookie with a little bit of sugar on the outside, and it's a sandwich cookie. So each one of these sleeves weighs 100 grams, and then I used half of another package to get the 50. Now let's taste this little bit here and see what they taste like. And they're just a very typical sandwich cookie with a slight chocolate flavor. Actually a little bit more vanilla than chocolate. But yeah, if you've ever had a cream-filled sandwich before, you've had essentially a bourbon cookie. So I think the Oreos are going to be a good substitution, but I think it's going to have more of a chocolatey flavor. We shall find out. In a food processor, we're going to add our cookies, and we're going to make a flour. Now we're just going to grind this up into a meal. A little loud. Consistency is kind of like graham cracker crumbs. Now I'm going to do the same thing with 250 grams of Oreo cookies. Okay, so now we have our cookie crumbs all ground up. Now we're going to add 1 cup of milk. Get my spatula. So I'm going to add half of the milk. This is just 1 cup. I've pre-measured this. and get all the cookie crumbs moistened. We're doing this to avoid lumps, I presume. And add the remaining milk. The recipe says you can also use water. That looks like a batter. Next, we're going to add the Eno, or our leavening for the cake. 1 teaspoon of Eno. And immediately on contact with the batter, it starts to fizz. And he says just to stir it into one direction, and you'll see it begin to react. And sure enough, there's some fizzing happening. Actually, you can hear some bubbling. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, it's getting lighter in color and bubbles are indeed happening. Now, I've got a 5-inch pan that I've sprayed this with baking spray, and we're going to add this to the baking pan. And for a little finish, we're going to top it with some chopped nuts. I'm just using some pecans. So I've got a pot here with a steamer basket. It's a tight fit. And cover that. And we're going to steam this on low for 25 minutes. So, see you in a little bit. So let's assemble the Oreo version. Another cup of milk. Just half at a time. I love the idea of using cookies to make a cake. It's funny. I love those transformations that you can. I love those transformative things where you take something that you know and make something else. Alrighty. Makes you feel like you're doing magic or something. Alright. And to this we'll add, now we're going to add our Eno, 1 teaspoon of that. Immediately I can hear it fizzing. Stir this gently in one direction. And the recipe says instead of using nuts, you can also use chocolate chips. So that's what I'm going to use in this recipe. A few chocolate chips on top. Oops, 1 went rogue, 2 went rogue, 3 went rogue. Oh. Okay, we're gonna pop this into a 350-degree oven for 25 minutes. See you in a little bit. Oh, it's hot. Alrighty, my lovelies, I am back and my cakes are finished. Here is the original cake, the steamed version. This cooked for exactly 26 minutes, pretty much as directed, and it looks beautiful. Looks like a beautiful cake. Would never ever know that this was made with antacid. Had a great rise, beautiful. And here is the Oreo baked version. Now this took an additional 6 minutes in the oven. When I pierced it in the middle with a toothpick, it was still very wet, so I gave it more time. And then after it came out of the oven, I let these cool off for about 10 minutes before I inverted them onto a plate and let them cool off a bit before I gave them a taste. Alrighty, the time has come. The time is now. Let's go ahead and cut into these. Let me grab myself a knife. Let's taste the original first. Here's the cake. Got myself a little plate. Alrighty, here we go. I love the small size of this cake. Feels very springy and bouncy. The texture feels a bit like a chiffon cake, very fluffy. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, that looks lovely. It looks very, very moist. Look at that. It smells great too. I'm smelling the chocolate now. Very moist. Look at that. All right, here we go. Itadakimasu. That's very nice. A very moist, soft cake. Lightly sweetened. It reminds me of a steamed cake that you can find in a Chinese bakery. In terms of sweetness, kind of similar in that way too. I would say by Western standards, this would be a very light cake. It's not overly sweet, which I appreciate. Both the texture of the cake itself and then the addition of pecans on top remind me a lot of banana bread, and that same moist texture, but not as sweet. The chocolate flavor is there, but it's pretty subtle. But considering that this was made out of cookies, this is great, absolutely wonderful. I would have had no idea whatsoever that this was made out of ground up cookies, milk, and antacid. Never in a million years. Set that one aside. So cool. Here is the Oreo baked version. This has a beautiful dark color to it, a different type of cocoa powder. This one slices nicely. It feels denser than the first one. The other one had more of a spring to it. Scoop this one up. Oh, indeed, look at that. And as you can see, all the chocolate chips that I put on top sink to the bottom, but they are still there. This looks really dark and fudgy. All right, let's give this a taste. Look at that. Here we go. I'm gonna have to take another bite. That doesn't really work as well. The bourbon cookies work better. Now this smells exactly like Oreo cookies. It has that really great, rich, dark, chocolatey smell. But in the cake version, I was expecting it to be wonderful. But as a cake, the flavor doesn't really translate. It's present, and I like the inclusion of the dark chocolate chips. It gives a little extra sweetness and richness, kind of reminiscent of frosting. But rather than having a nice Oreo flavor, it tastes a little bit burnt. Hey my lovelies, I'm back to give you a little update. So when I tasted the cakes earlier, they were still slightly warm, and now that the cakes are completely cooled, they taste different, and I wanted to let you know. So the Oreo one, the one I said did not taste very good, it tastes great, but you have to let the cake completely cool. It has a nice springy texture, very moist, tight crumb, but the flavor of the Oreo comes out much, much more clearly than it did when it was slightly warm. And I think it works really well. It's not an overly sweet cake by any means, but it has a very distinctive Oreo flavor. And I think it's an amazing cake considering that we made this out of crushed cookies, some milk, and some antacid. Great. Now let's try the bourbon one again. Now this one I liked more to the Oreo cookie. And I still like it. But now that they've cooled completely, I actually prefer the Oreo cookie better. I feel like it's a more flavorful cake. In terms of sweetness, the Oreo one is just slightly sweeter, and the bourbon one, while it does have a chocolate flavor to it, it's pretty light. It's more kind of a subtle cocoa flavor. I do like the nuts. I like the contrast of textures when you have the nuts on top. But in terms of flavor, I like the Oreo better, and I'm so glad that I tasted it again when the cake was completely cooled. And they always tell you in cake recipes, make sure you serve the cake when it's completely cool, but you just can't resist because it's so wonderful straight out of the oven. It's all toasty and happy, but it's true, especially when you are baking with eggs, even though we didn't use eggs in this case. You gotta let the cake cool off to kind of just let the flavors kind of wake up and settle down. That bite had a little bit of chocolate chip in it, which is great. Really intense little burst of chocolate flavor in there, nice and melty, delicious. So there you have it, my final thoughts on the Eno or Antacid cake. I think it was very successful, especially considering that we only used 3 or 4 ingredients. The first one being crushed up cookies and the second one being Antacid. Pretty amazing. So let me know down in the comments if you've ever used some sort of unconventional ingredient in a recipe. I want to know all about it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I hope you guys learned something. Big thanks to Violet for bringing this recipe to my attention. Please share this video with your friends and follow me on social media. Like this video, subscribe, and I shall see you in the next one. Toodaloo, take care, bye! Bye! Cake burp? Why? I don't know.